What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to do a crash course on one of the most downloaded Python libraries out there called requests. We're going to learn about basic HTTP requests, the different types there are, what they do, and we're going to learn about some more intermediate or advanced features of the requests module. We're going to learn how to work with proxies. We're going to learn how to change the user agent. We're going to learn how to download content, byte content like images, for example. We're going to also learn how to work with different status codes and with timeouts. So we're going to cover some of the more intermediate or advanced features. However, we're not going to cover all of the features because this library is quite comprehensive, but I'm going to try to simplify and explain the concepts that can be interesting to a beginner or intermediate Python programmer. So let us get right into it.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
Alright, so the request package is an external Python package. It's not part of the core Python stack, which means that we need to install it before we can use it. And for that, we open up a command line and we type pip install requests. Now, chances are you will already have it on your system because it's one of the most downloaded and one of the most used packages out there. But if you don't have it, you can just install it using pip. And then we can import it by saying import requests. And we can do some basic stuff like saying requests.get. Then a URL, and this sends a GET request. Or we can do request.post, and this sends a POST request to the URL with some data that we can provide as well. That's the basic idea, and we're going to use a specific web service for our requests today. We're going to use http-bin.org. This is a simple HTTP request and response service. It offers multiple different endpoints, and those endpoints return different responses. So for example, we can send a simple get request to the get endpoint, and we're going to get a simple response with some data. We can also send a get request to status/404 to get a not found status code. So we can force the status code, or 500 to get an internal server error, which is not so simple if you're working with an actual website, because then you have to figure out, how do I cause a 500 status code? Here you can just say, I want to have a 500 status code, and then you can handle this in the Python code, for example. So this is a very nice comprehensive service to learn about the request module, because we can decide what the content of the response will be. We also have stuff like delaying the response, so we can work with timeouts. We also have cookies, and we have images and stuff like that. So this makes it very easy for us to work with requests. Now, before we get into the code, let's cover these 5 basic HTTP methods. We're not going to work with all of them. In today's video, we're only going to look at get and post. But the basic idea is that you want to use a get request whenever you want to get information about a resource. You want to use a post request whenever you create or upload a new resource. You want to use a put request when you want to completely change an existing resource, so you want to update it completely. You want to use patch when you only change certain aspects, specific attributes, for example, of a resource. And you want to use delete when you want to delete a resource. Those are these 5 HTTP methods here. And now let's just get started with the very basic get request. We're going to just say response equals requests.get, and we're going to send the request to https://http-bin.org/get. And this will then give us the response. And with the response, first of all, we can just print the status code. So response.status code to see if we get something valid. 200. If I enter something that doesn't exist, probably we're going to get 404. There you go, not found. So this gives us the status code, but we can also print the content. Now, you can do that while watching this video. I recommend you code along. You can do that now. You're going to see that your IP is being displayed. Of course, due to privacy reasons, I don't want my IP to be displayed here. So you don't have to do what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to turn this into a JSON object and remove the IP field. So the origin of the request is the IP. I'm going to remove that field just so that I can show you the output without the IP, but you don't have to do that. I'm just doing this for privacy reasons. So if you want to print the full response, you just type response.text. This is going to give us, give you the full content of the response. You can also say respond JSON. This is going to give you a dictionary, because the response of this API is a JSON object, which is equivalent to a Python dictionary. So you can just turn this into a dictionary. I'm going to now call this rest JSON, and I'm going to delete the rest JSON origin field. So this is the IP address. And then I'm going to print rest JSON. And again, I just do this so that you don't see my IP address displayed, because by default, you also have here an additional field origin and then the IP address that this request was sent from. I'm going to display it when we work with proxies, because then we're going to only see the proxy IP address. But yeah, you can see we have some responses here, nothing too fancy. You can see the user agent, you can see the host that we're sending the request to. This is the header, basically. And you know, we can now add some more stuff using the request module. So oftentimes you will have the option to have query parameters in the URL. So you could say something like get question mark and then name equals Mike and age equals 25, for example, if you're querying something. Now we can do that without doing it manually with the question mark and the equal and the and operator. We can just say that we want to pass parameters. So we can say params equal, and then we can provide a dictionary, and we can say that the name is Mike and the age is 25. And then we can just add this here as params. So params equals params. And the first thing that I want to display here is I want to display the URL. So we can see when I say response.url, we can see the resulting URL. And you can see it's now http://bin.org/get question mark name equals Mike and age equals 25. And you can also see that we now have in the arguments key value pair, we also have now a dictionary with age 25 and name Mike. This is what the response is. So this is what the API receives when we send this here. So that's quite simple. Now let's do a simple post request. With a post request, it works differently. We don't send it using parameters. If we do a post request, what we do is we say data equals, and then we usually call this payload. This is the best practice way. So we say payload equals, and then name Mike age 25, and that's basically what we do. We call a post request. Also, we don't do it on get, we do it on /post. And here you can see now that we have no arguments, but we have, there you go, we have the form data, the form age 25, name Mike. So this is how you send a post request. You can do the same thing for put and for patch and stuff like that. Those are the very basics. Now, let us see how we can handle different status codes, because oftentimes when you do something like web scraping or you want to explore some API, you might want to have a loop that does everything in an automated way, but sometimes you might do something that causes an error. Sometimes you might get specific status codes that will produce problems for you. So what you can do in this case is you can just send a response. So in this case, we're going to send a response to the status endpoint. So we're going to say /status/200, which is success. This is the default. We can send a GET request to this. This will not be a problem. We can just print response.statuscode. You will see, okay, what's the problem here? Oh, I think I cannot, in this case, we don't get the IP address, so we cannot remove it. But this is the status code that we get here. Now, if I change this to something else like 404, this is going to produce 404. So you can see the status code of the response is influenced by what we enter into the URL. And what we would usually do is we would not cause a 404. A 404 would happen, so we don't find something and it would just return this error code or status code. So what we want to do is we want to say, okay, if the response status code is equal to, and you don't even have to memorize the number, you can just use response.code, or actually, what was it? Response.codes, plural. And then you can just specify not_found, and you can print not found, for example, and else you can just print response.statuscode. And what's the problem here? Oh, not response, sorry, requests. Requests.codes. So this is from the request module. We have a codes module, or for the request package, we have a codes module. And here we have these constants not found, which basically is 404, but you don't have to memorize the number. You can just check for it. If I change this now to something else like 500, internal server error, it will just display the code because it's not this one. So this is how we can do that. We can just do, if the status code is not found, do something. If we have an internal server error, wait, try again. If we have 200, just continue. You can handle the different status codes using the status code attribute of the response and using the codes provided by the request module. But of course, you can also specify the number directly. That's not a problem. All right. So another thing that you might want to do is sometimes you want to change the user agent. So the user agent is essentially an identification that tells the web service what software you're using. So by default, I think we can see that actually if we, what was the endpoint for this? We have a special endpoint user agent, but we can also just, see it in the header. But if I say user agent, here is the endpoint, and I print the response.text, we get the user agent from the header. So you can see the user agent right now is Python requests and then some version number. But oftentimes websites will block you because they see, okay, you're using Python requests. You're not an actual web browser. You're not an iPhone with a Safari browser. You're not a MacBook with a Google Chrome browser. You are Python requests. I don't want to serve you. Or I will serve you differently. So oftentimes the web service will respond differently because of the way the site is structured based on your user agent. So what you can do is you can just specify a different user agent manually while sending the request. So how you would do that is you would say headers is a dictionary, and there is this field user-agent like this. And here you can just specify the user agent. So I can do now hello world 1.1 or something like that. And in this case, it didn't work because we didn't pass the headers. So we need to also, when we do request.get, say headers equals headers. And then you can see the user agent is now hello world. In this case, doesn't make a lot of sense, but what we can also do here, and I have to copy this from my prepared code because I don't want to type this out. You can just Google it. We can also set this to a customized user agent that is, for example, in this case, iPhone, Apple WebKit, and Safari. So you can see this is now the user agent for an iPhone. I can just send this, and then the web service sees that I'm browsing from this user agent, and it will serve me like an iPhone that's using Safari. That's the basic idea. We can also provide different stuff in the header. So for example, we can also specify what kind of content we accept, and this can be quite useful when we download images, for example. So if I go down here, we have an endpoint image, which returns a simple image, and the type of the image, unless we go for a specific endpoint, the type of this image here is going to be suggested by the accept header. So this is something that we can also specify in the header. We just have to say accept, and then I can specify the file type of the image that I want to download. So for example, image/PNG or image/JPEG. And then I would just send a request to image and then headers equals headers. And in this case, I would get a response, but the response would be bytes. So we don't want to work with text. We want to actually save this into a binary file. We want to save this into an image. And this can be done quite easily by just saying with open myimage.png in writing bytes mode, sf, and then just f write response.content. So not text, but content, because that leaves it in the byte format. And then I can just open this. You can see it's a pic. I downloaded the image with the request module from the API. If I now go ahead and change this to JPEG, first of all, it will give me a different image because the API is programmed in that way. But also, I would have to save this as a JPEG file so that I actually see the image. But then you can see we have, what is this? A wolf? A deer? No, I don't know. But yeah, this is how you do that. You send the request, you specify the file type that you want to accept. I think it should also support WebP. I'm not sure about that though. WebP. Let's see if that works. But I think we do have to then open this. Can I open this in the browser? Doesn't matter. You can check this on your own if you want to, but you can specify just what file type you want to accept. Those are the supported ones: JPEG, PNG, SVG, WebP. So this should actually work. And then you get the image, and you can do that by specifying this in the header. Now, another thing that I want to show you here that's quite useful is oftentimes when you want to, for example, you have a list of proxies. This would be a use case. You have a list of proxies, of free public proxies. You want to see which of those proxies work, and you want to just do it by using the proxy, sending a request to a simple website and seeing if that works. Sometimes you will not get an exception, an error immediately. You will have to wait for, I don't know, 2 minutes until you get the response, which basically means it doesn't work or it's very, very slow, but it's technically speaking not giving you an error right away, so you have to wait. What you can do in this case is you can you can specify a certain timeout. So if the response doesn't come in that timeout or in that defined tolerance time, you're going to just quit, you're going to raise an exception, and you're going to continue, for example. So what we could do here is we could, in this case, we want to target the, the delay endpoint. We just do /delay and then seconds. So /delay, and we can delay here for 3 seconds, for example. And let's do it without the timeout first. Let's just do it like this. I'm not sure if we're going to get the same response. There you go. So we get the response like from the basic get, but we delay it for 3 seconds. So I can also delay it for 5 seconds. It will take longer. So you can see nothing happens, nothing happens. After 5 seconds, it's going to respond. Now, let's say we don't want to tolerate this. Let's say we want to have a certain timeout. What we can do is we can say timeout equals, and then we can say I'm allowing for 3 seconds, but if it's longer than 3 seconds, just raise an exception and break. So you can see now we had a read timeout. We have this exception, and what we could do here is we could just say for whatever in some collection, 1, 2, 3, I don't know. So you have basically URLs that you're trying or proxy service that you're trying, you're doing something, and you would do something like try. It's lagging now. You would do something like try to send a request, but if there is a timeout, so if it doesn't work, just continue, right? So you would do it like this. This would not break the script then, but it would basically tell you, it would basically just skip that particular instance. And of course, 3 is maybe a little bit too small, but you can specify a timeout of maybe 30 seconds. If you don't get a response for 30 seconds, you just skip. And you can see here, if I delay for only 2 seconds, this will actually work. But I would have to, let me just delete the structure again here. If I delay for only 2 seconds with a timeout for 3 seconds, this would actually work. As you can see, it's in the tolerance. All right, so then last but not least, what I want to show you is how to use proxy servers. I have done it in some videos already. I even have a video on rotating proxies. The basic idea is you want to specify a proxy server. You can either have a paid one or you can find one for free online that works, and you want to send a request through that proxy server. So you don't send a request to HTTP bin, you send a request to the proxy server, and the proxy server sends the request to HTTP bin. How would we do that? We would just say proxies equal and then HTTP. You would specify the IP address of the proxy. I have found one here, 139.99.237.62 port 80. This is just a public free server that seems to work at the moment. And then you would also specify one for HTTPS. Now this one doesn't work for HTTPS. I'm just entering it here so that we have something. In order for this to work in this particular case, because this is just an HTTP proxy, we would have to target the HTTP API. This is not a problem in this case, but if you want to do it professionally, of course, you want to use an actual professional proxy that also allows for HTTPS. Now we're going to do this on the get endpoint. We're not going to have a timeout, and we're going to also not delete the origin, because this time we want to see the IP address, because the IP address will not be my IP address if I provide proxies equal to proxies. This is what we need to do. We need to say proxies equals proxies, then it's going to use this, and it's going to give me the response. So print response dot text. We can run this, and you're going to see now the origin is this IP address. This is not my IP address. This is the IP address of the proxy server. So this is how you can do that. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting a like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching. See you in the next video and bye.